soothing it looks.
Hello, everybody. It is Friday, December 1st, 2023. Welcome to episode 66 of the Old Men Magic podcast. It's been a while, Alex. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I've been away. I went to far off lands. I visited Adelaide and Brisbane. These are two cities in Australia. What did I do when I was there? All sorts of stuff, Alex. Mostly I walked around. I don't know what you like to do when you travel abroad, when you go to new cities. I just like to wander. I'm a flaneur, if that's how you pronounce the word. I saunter through alleyways, down roads. I visit cafes. I take my time. I averaged like 10 to 15 miles a day walking when I was there, which is like
That's
way
good.
different than how I live my life here normally. It's much better. I was walking like 30,000 steps or something, and I came back. And the first few days I was back, I was looking at my step count, and it was like 1,000, and I was freaking out. I don't know. A lot of people complain when they go on vacations. They're like, "Oh, I gain weight when I go on vacations because I'm eating a bunch of food and stuff." Every time I go on vacation, I come back lighter.
I mean, I eat a lot. Like my favorite things to do on vacation are eat but also walk. Like you, I want to like go around, and just like check stuff out. So I walk and eat and walk and eat, and it works
Yeah,
itself out.
I ate like crazy. I mean, we went to cafes like every morning. I went to breakfasts, brunches. I went to lunches. I went to dinners. But all the walking in between, it
Good.
burns everything off. I lost weight. I built my quads. I built my hammies. My feet were sore as fuck. Going from like a sedentary lifestyle to all of a sudden walking like 15 miles every day, it was bad for like the first 3 days. But I went to a pharmacy. I got some Dr. Scholl's inserts. Swear to God, it was a game changer, Alex. The rest of the trip was fantastic. It was like walking around on clouds.
There's a magic card for you, Dr. Scholl's insert.
That would be a good unglued equipment. Perfect one. That would be the fantastic crossover, actually. Next, whatchamacallits. What do you call them? What are the crossover sets? It's late. I'm blanking.
Oh, I know what you mean. Like the Universes Beyond.
Universes Beyond, Dr. Scholl's.
Did I do it right?
Yeah. I saw my first huntsman spider in the wild, Alex. Do you know huntsman spiders?
Oh no, I think so. I think I've seen it. They're big but not poisonous.
They're big but not poisonous. I've been to Australia a couple times. I've seen the huntsman. I've seen pictures of huntsmen on Google, but I've never seen a huntsman in real life.
It's coming right at us.
I saw my first one in the wild. That
You're
was
gonna have to
very
put like a
exciting.
spider trigger warning on this podcast for people. Look at it up there. It's ready.
It was not in my house. It was not in my residence, which was good. If it was, I would have been freaked out. This was just outside where it belonged. So it wasn't nearly as scary. I took a photograph of it. I saw cane toads. Not the first time I saw cane toads,
okay,
but they're still exciting. I always think about the Simpsons episode where they show the cane toad taking over Australia. I saw a python on the streets. I saw a street possum. I saw magpies everywhere. I saw signs, warning signs saying there are aggressive swooping magpies in this area. The signs literally said, avoid this area at all costs. I continued forward.
Did it really say at all costs?
I continued forward unafraid. It did say at all costs. I can show you the photograph. I took the photograph of the sign. It was very bizarre because it was in the middle of a city on a busy street, and it's like, avoid this area at all costs. Meanwhile, there's just people walking back and forth all day. I saw galahs. I saw sulfur-crested and Major Mitchell's cockatoos. I saw a rainbow lorikeets. I saw a willy wagtail, Alex.
First of all, any of those made up?
None of them are made up.
Okay.
They're all real.
Second, where are the pictures of those? You still have us looking at the creepy spiders.
I'll show you a willy wagtail. They're pretty cute.
Hopefully nothing weird comes up when you search for that.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, look at them.
Oh, it's like a chickadee.
See how cute this thing is?
Yeah.
They move back and forth. Their tail wags.
Oh, okay.
Here, the best. Yeah, there we go. Here's this photo is off the side of the screen. There you go. Willy wagtail, super cute. I heard lots of people say "ner" everywhere I was going. To my left, to my right, people are going "ner" all the time. You know how Australians say no? They say "ner" instead. You just hear "ner." Like
really? I didn't know that.
You're not on TikTok. If you were on TikTok, you'd see lots and lots of videos about Australians going "ner," and they do. It's true in real life. I witnessed it. I heard it. I ate my first sausage roll and my first lamington, Alex. These are two staple foods for the everyday Australian. Never had them before because they're not typically gluten-free, but I found gluten-free versions of both, and they were very good. Shout out to the Flower Leopard in Brisbane for their excellent gluten-free sausage roll, and also to that place in the food court in Rundle Mall just outside of David Jones in Adelaide for their gluten-free lamington, which was not that great. It was super dry. And when I said it was super dry, I was told that that's how lamingtons are. They're made from old cake. So it seems like a subpar dessert in general.
Okay, interesting. Old cake.
Old cake. I drank cocktails, Alex, on rooftop bars, on ground floor bars. I don't really drink anymore, so I'm a serious lightweight. Now I have one cocktail and I'm like tipsy. Best bar that I went to in Australia, Bar Brutus. It's in Brisbane. My cocktail was warm, rich. It smelled of bruleed banana. It was delicious, Alex. It was an excellent cocktail. Best cocktail I've had in a long time.
A warm creme brulee banana cocktail?
It was really good, yeah.
Sounds good.
I don't remember what was in it, actually. I don't remember a lot of things. I go through life, enjoy my experiences as I have.
Live in the moment.
And then they're just wiped from my memory.
Some people are just taking pictures of everything, clickety click, you know.
Oh, I do have photos actually, so like I could go back.
Yeah, some photos, you know, enjoy it, live it.
I saw several Starbucks when I was in Australia. I was told that Starbucks was kicked out of Australia. I actually watched a YouTube video a couple years ago about how Starbucks tried to move into Australia and they kicked them out of the country. They're like, get out of here with this bullshit.
Yeah.
But I saw several Starbucks. You guys
don't serve beer
in Brisbane. And even though I'm a shareholder, I spat at their doorsteps. Instead, I visited local cafes. I drank their flat whites, their cappuccinos, their iced long blacks. It was delicious, Alex. Australia has a great cafe culture.
Okay.
I'm sad to be back in America and back to the grind, but I'm happy to be back to old men magic. I want to say to all the listeners, thank you for not abandoning us while we didn't post for a couple of weeks. We actually gained a few subs. Nobody quit on us as far as I know.
Nice.
I think I started the vacation with like 181 or 182 subs. Now we got 185. So today we're back to the podcast. We have another topic to discuss. We have slivers decks for your consideration. We've talked about slivers already on this podcast. We went through the Premodern Sliver card pool. We reviewed what sliver creatures are available to you if you want to start making sliver decks. I'm in the market for a sliver deck at the moment. I wanted to make my own. While doing so, in addition to reviewing the sliver card pool out there, I've been going through some old classic sliver decks to get some ideas. Today, I want to discuss some of those classic sliver decks that I found. But first, follow-ups, Alex.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say ups. It's just up. It's just a follow-up. We have a single follow-up today. Before we get started with episode 66, well, the topic for episode 66. Technically, we've already started episode 66.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention something we brought up in last episode. In episode 65, we talked about a deck that contained both Squee, Goblin Nabob, and Nether Spirit. So this is Squee, Goblin Nabob. It's a creature that at the beginning of your upkeep, if it's in your graveyard, it comes back to your hand. That's Squee. That's what it does. And Nether Spirit. Waiting for Scryfall to load. Nether Spirit is another creature that at the beginning of your upkeep, if Nether Spirit is the only creature card in your graveyard, you may return Nether Spirit to play. So Squee comes back to your hand if it's in your graveyard. Nether Spirit comes back to play if it's the only creature in your graveyard. Both of these things trigger at the beginning of your upkeep.
Which is why we had our question, because they both trigger at the beginning.
We were looking at these two cards. We had a question. If both Squee and Nether Spirit are in a player's graveyard at the upkeep, if a player decides to return Squee to their hand at the beginning of your upkeep, will the Nether Spirit effect then trigger as soon as Squee leaves the graveyard? So Squee would leave the graveyard, then Nether Spirit would be the only creature in the graveyard. Would Nether Spirit's effect trigger? I asked the Hive Mind on Twitter, on Threads, on the Premodern Discord, and the Hive Mind came through. A fella named &defeated_r on Twitter and MTG Banding on Threads responded to my question. So &defeated said, Nether Spirit has a triggered ability with an intervening if clause, which means the ability checks when it should go on the stack, and right before it resolves, if the condition of the trigger is still met to even trigger a resolve. So basically, it checks right before it's supposed to resolve to see if the conditions are met. MTG Banding said, if those two cards are in your graveyard, Nether Spirit would stay in the graveyard for that turn. You cannot return both Squee to hand and Nether Spirit to play in the same turn. And this, I can't remember what site this was from, but he found this note for Nether Spirit. If Nether Spirit isn't the only creature card in your graveyard as the upkeep begins, its ability won't trigger. You can't take any actions during your turn before you upkeep.
It checks before you have the ability to use the squeeze ability.
Exactly. So it checks right at the beginning of your upkeep. And then he actually pulled up this ruling from the comprehensive rules. The key part being the ability triggers only if it is. So rule 603.4, a triggered ability may read when, whenever, at, if, blah, blah, blah. When the trigger event occurs, the ability checks whether that stated condition is true. The ability triggers only if it is. Otherwise, it does nothing. So basically, when the trigger event occurs, in this case, the beginning of your upkeep, the ability checks whether the stated condition is true. At the beginning of your upkeep, Squee would not have yet returned to your hand. So Squee and Nether Spirit would both be in the graveyard. Nether Spirit can't return. That answers our question. You can stack triggered abilities, which is part of the question we had. Okay, if you could stack triggered abilities, can you just stack the Squee before the Nether Spirit? Yeah. And then they resolve in the opposite order. Mm-hmm. You can stack triggered abilities, but the problem is with the Nether Spirit, since it checks whether or not the condition is true at the beginning of your upkeep, if Squee is there at the beginning of your upkeep in your graveyard, the Nether Spirit will check, see it's not the only creature card in your graveyard, and then it won't even go on the stack.
Yeah.
So it just never triggers.
Which makes sense. I mean,
yeah. But, you know, question we had, It was resolved by the hive mind. Thank you for pointing out the relevant ruling in the comprehensive rules. I appreciated that. Side note, I was listening to the episode of the Spike Colony podcast. This is a podcast with Mike Flores and Lanny MTG, I think, is his Twitter name, his handle. And I was listening to this episode. It was a recent episode. And I learned from this episode that apparently everybody who gets into pre-modern at some point early on gets obsessed with like the zombie infestation squee deck and tries to optimize it and gets on the pre-modern MTG Discord and starts posting about it and gets really excited and builds it. And then nobody's ever able to actually make it very good.
Oh, yeah.
So we just did this.
What are we talking about here? You're talking about decks that use squee and zombie infestation? Yeah. Or is it you're talking more about a broader type of deck?
Well, it was more broad, like well, he referred to them as dredge at home decks, dredge at home. So essentially it's the squee, it's the Krovikan horror, and it's the zombie infestation. So it's any deck that has the squee, the Krovikan horror, the Ashen Ghoul.
Okay. So those types of
they don't all have
shadowy type effects.
Exactly. They don't all have all three of those cards, but they have some creatures that have this ability where they end up in your graveyard and they come back to your hand, and then people want to play them with cards that have some sort of effect when you discard, so they come back and you keep doing the thing because it's just a fun thing to do.
Yeah,
this recursion, pitching cards, having some effect, getting the cards back, pitching them again. Apparently you and I aren't the first people to get into pre-modern Magic, see these decks and be like, oh, I want to build one of these decks, try to make it better. Apparently it's it's a phase that every pre-modern Magic player goes through.
Good. I'm glad you told me that.
So now you don't have to bother trying to optimize it because 100,000 people have already tried to do it before us, and it's never going to be that good. But also, side note, does it matter if it's never going to be that good?
No.
I say no.
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah.
No.
I say no also. We're not trying to win tournaments. So if you're just playing like kitchen table Magic, I mean, part of the fun is just building a deck that sometimes does the thing that you like to do.
Yeah.
And if you win like 30% of your games, but that's 30% of the time you get to do the damn thing, then it's still worth it.
I agree.
That's my opinion. But anyways, that's the end of our follow-ups. Now we're going to get into segment 1. This is the only segment of this episode of the Home Magic Podcast. It's probably going to be a short one today. Segment 1, I'm calling Some Sliver Decks for your consideration. So all the way back in episode 59, Alex, we reviewed the Sliver Creature card pool in Premodern. This was an introduction to the old frame Sliver card pool, not only for the viewers, if they weren't familiar with them already, but for us as well. Neither one of us had ever built a Slivers deck before. But now that we're familiar with the creatures, I've been thinking about how to build a Sliver deck, what kind of Sliver deck I want to build, what are the different strategies you could follow, what are the best ways to build the deck according to those strategies. In addition to thinking, because thinking's hard, I've been just net decking, seeing what other people have already done. Just look it up. That's much easier sometimes than just building stuff from scratch. I want to now discuss some of the decks that I found on the net that I thought were the most interesting. Some of these decks are pre-modern legal, some are not. The first one I want to talk about is called Counter Slivers. Counter Slivers is like an archetype now, kind of like Counter Burn. So there's a whole bunch of decks called Counter Slivers out there. I wanted to talk about one in particular that can be found on MTG Top 8. It is an extended deck. It is Counter Sliver by Christian Gregorich. He played this in Grand Prix Vienna in 1999. You can see the other decks that top aided in this tournament. Number 1 was High Tide. He came in second with his counter sliver. 3, 4, 5 through 8. These were Megrim jar decks.
See that? Yeah.
I don't know. We talked about these on a very early episode of the Old Man Magic podcast when you and I both saw Memory Jar for the first time. I don't know if you remember any of this.
Yeah, our old friend Ryan, who we just started talking to recently, found out he plays Magic still. He was just talking about that.
Did he have a Memory Jar Megrim deck?
No, he was just I think he was just bringing it up historically, like talking about like the historical context there. It's just funny he was just talking about that today.
Yeah, but this was the Broken Jar deck. Finished 3rd and 4th in Grand Prix ran in 1999, and it was responsible for like the very first emergency banning of a card, I think. Anywho, side note, counter slivers. This counter sliver deck placed higher than this Broken Jar deck, this Broken Memory Jar Megrim deck in 99. And I put Christian Gregorich's deck list into Moxfield. So I'm going to pull this up in Moxfield, and then we're going to go through the different cards in the deck. Everything's loading kind of slow today. We're getting there. It's happening. This is just the list. I'm going to do visual grid because I like doing visual grid. Every time I put decks into Moxfield, I select visual grid, and then I select this button down here that says set as default for others. I see this, I assume that means that this new layout now would become the default layout for all of the decks that I put into our Moxfield, but it never seems to work out that way. They always revert to text. I like the visual grid. Somebody out there explain to me what I'm doing wrong. How can I get every deck that I load into Moxfield just to default to the visual grid layout? Is there a way? I don't know. Summary of this deck. It's a 4-color deck, Alex. It's pretty much 1 part creatures, 1 part removal counters, 1 part lands for the most part. 20 creatures, all 2 casting cost. I love this. I've been very focused lately on building decks with very low mana curves. On a lot of the competitive decks that we've been going through over the last, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 episodes or so, very low mana curves. This shouldn't surprise me. It's good to be able to cast powerful spells for cheap. But myself, like back in the day, not being a competitive Magic player, I would pay attention to my mana curve. I would, want to have a certain number of 1 drops, 2 drops, 3 drops, 4 drops. But I would often play cards that were like 5 casting cost. Fairly frequently, actually. I would throw them into my deck here and there. I've seen a lot of these competitive decks. It's just like topping out at 3 casting cost.
So, yeah, I guess maybe I haven't been looking at like the very most competitive decks, but I was gonna say I sort of like have been surprised by how some like 5 casting cost cards like see play. I'd shy away from them, but some of them seem like popular, and I have no examples.
I was gonna say, really, what are you thinking about? Okay. We've been talking a lot about the sliver decks now. We've been talking a lot about the Turbo Xerox decks, the Miracle Grow decks. These are all like really heavy on 1, 2, 3 casting cost spells, but largely like 2 casting costs. I don't know if it was just this era. This was what was competitive. And I also heard a quote. I can't remember where I heard this quote. It might have been on the Spike Colony podcast. and I think it was attributed to Zvi Mauschwitz, where he said, like, if you're going to play a forecasting cost spell, it better be a game ender. Which I didn't necessarily always think about forecasting cost creatures or spells like that. I would, load my decks with forecasting cost creatures.
Yeah, Dragon Whelp.
Yeah, exactly. I love Dragon Whelp. I'd play Dragon Whelp all the time.
Yeah, not really a game ender. Now,
Never
Armageddon,
end in any games. Yeah.
Wrath of God are both game enders for 4 mana. So
Yeah.
I get that.
Shivan could be a game ender back in the early days, but it was 6 mana. Plus you would pump it more mana. But anyways, it's got me thinking more about trying to build my decks with very low mana curves.
I mean, is Ravenous Baloth a game ender?
I was going to bring that up. So like when I said Zvi Mauschwitz, and I think that was his quote. I shouldn't say quote. I definitely paraphrased it. I don't know exactly what the quote was, but it was an idea that was expressed by him. If you're going to pay a forecasting cost card, it better be a game ender. I think of him, I think about his Fires decks and Fires of Yavimaya decks. And, those are full of 4 and 5 casting costs. Cards that on their own aren't necessarily game enders. Blastoderm.
Yeah, Flametongue
Kavu. But, that's also in a deck with ramp, too. Birds of Paradise.
You have some animals in there, so.
And Saproling Burst, if you have a Fires of Yavimaya out to give the burst haste, that definitely can be a game ender, even though it's 5 casting cost. 5 casting cost, that can end the game. So. Anywho.
Yeah, no, it seems like a bit of a severe quote or requirement, but I definitely appreciate, having a deck where everything's low casting cost. You don't want to get your opening hand clogged up with things you can't play.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm getting more into building decks with 1, 2, 3. The top out of 3. There's a lot you can do. You think, oh yeah, all my juice, all my powerful cards. What am I? 3 casting costs. That's going to be the top of my mana curve. It's also going to be the top of my power level. How much power can you get from a 3 casting cost card? Well, there's ways to get a lot of power out from low casting cost card.
I think
especially.
So. Sorry.
Even in decks like this, like the sliver deck, you have a bunch of 2 casting cost slivers, but they synergize with one another.
Right. Yeah. Elves.
Yeah.
Goblins, whatever. For me, it's just more that I get sad that I don't get to use those cards that are 4 and 5 and 6 casting cost. Like,
you can still do it,
sit there just like gathering dust. Like, I want to play with those cards and have a more varied, I don't know.
You can still do it at the kitchen table.
Yeah, I know.
And even outside of the kitchen table, like pre-modern goblins, Siege Gang Commanders, 5 casting cost. Certain kind of decks.
Sunder, but like I don't know if that gets played like at the top level. It probably doesn't.
Sunder?
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of like a 5 casting cost spell or something.
What is Sunder again?
Sunder returns all lands to play, or I can look it up now because I can't even remember. I have one. Return all lands to their owner's hands. Yes, I was right.
5 casting cost?
Yeah, 3 blue.
Oh, okay.
Blue 3, I should say. So it's less confusing.
Anywho, I went on a bit of a tangent. 20 creatures, all 2 casting costs. Mostly, but not all slivers. I say mostly slivers. There's Wall of Blossoms in here. He throws in 4 Wall of Blossoms, which unexpected. I wouldn't think to do that, but Wall of Blossoms is a good card. I don't know what he was worried about facing, and he might need a 4 toughness blocker on turn 2. Maybe he could have also just thought, hey, I got everything I want in this deck, and I still got 4 slots left. So why don't I just put in a card that has cantrip ability? So who knows? But Wall of Blossoms is a good card. Wall of Blossoms is a card that I put in a lot of decks, and then I just end up taking it out at some point.
Yes, that's one of those cards for me too, where I'm kind of like, I like this, and then I start wondering how many I should have. I'm like, maybe not 4, maybe it should be 2, or and then I'm like, oh, maybe I should take it out.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. Trying to
So you
make
got your
things perfect.
you got your slivers. You got your crystalline sliver, which is a sliver that has to be in every sliver deck. Makes your other slivers untargetable. You got your muscle sliver, which is a sliver that has to be in every sliver deck, according to me. It gives all your slivers +1/+1.
I don't think I put crystalline in mine, but keep going.
Oh, that's psychotic, Alex.
Psychotic.
What are you talking about? How could you do such a thing? You rethink that. I don't know what kind of deck you've built so far in slivers, but I mean,
What
crystalline
kind of
is.
deck have you built?
Well, no, I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know what your strategy is. That's what I'm saying. But like, I mean, crystalline sliver is like the linchpin of a slivers deck.
I agree. It's very good.
You just didn't put it in. Hibernation sliver, which is the sliver that says each sliver gains pay 2 life, return this creature to owner's hand. So you could pay 2 life to bounce your slivers back. Not my favorite sliver. Like, I've put a couple copies in some of my sliver decks because I'm like, oh, maybe if there's a board wipe, I can, if they Wrath of God, I can save 1 or 2 slivers if I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Victual sliver, aka Victual sliver, which is a sliver we talked about, and we, I think, decided that
At
we would
length.
not run it. Yeah, you liked it more than I did.
No, I was
sliver
talking about we were
gains.
talking about the name of it, but anyway.
Okay. Each sliver gains 2 colorless. Sacrifice this creature, gain 4 life. And then wing sliver, which helps slivers decks and games. There was another blue sliver. There was forecasting cost that made all your slivers unblockable that I put in my sliver deck originally. And then after looking at other sliver decks and talking it through on that episode of the podcast, episode 59, I thought to myself, I mean, wing sliver is going to be more than enough evasion a lot of the time. I don't know what percentage to assign to it. 70% of the time, 80% of the time. That you don't really need a forecasting cost sliver that makes all your slivers unblockable. You could just play the 2 casting cost wing sliver. There's not a lot of flyers that I'm facing in pre-modern Magic. There's Exalted Angel, there's some other angels, but
you want to get these slivers down quickly. You don't. I agree. In a deck like this, like, you don't want to be holding forecasting cost creatures. You want to be getting them down. I don't know if I said something different than that the first time we talked about slivers, because I can't remember what I said about the forecasting cost one. But
well, I was the one that wanted to play the forecasting cost one, and you kind of leaned me away from it.
Oh, really?
I don't remember exactly what you said either, but after discussing it with you, I was like, hey, wing sliver does the job most of the time.
It does the job. Forget
about that forecasting cost sliver. If you want to play a forecasting cost sliver, there are some other better ones to probably play. So those are the creatures, mostly slivers, and then it's counter spells and the best targeted removal spells from white. So he did with this deck with counter slivers what I did with all of my decks that I built in the 90s, which is I put white in just to play Swords of Plowshares and Disenchant.
Yep.
So he has 2 Swords of Plowshares, 2 Disenchant, and he has counter spells. He has Disrupt, which is an interesting counter, 1 blue, counter target instant or sorcery spell unless its controller pays 1 colorless, draw a card. We talked about this in our cantrip episode. The classic from Legends, Force Spike, 1 blue, target spells countered unless its caster spends an additional 1 colorless. He has Impulse to do blue things, and then 4 Force of Will. Force of Will, why do you play these? You play these when they're legal, you play them. If you're playing blue and they're legal, you play fucking Force of Will.
Why do you play them? Because you can. Yeah.
You're supposed to. If you don't, there's something wrong with you mentally, probably.
You're a loose cannon.
4 counter spell. Well, when you play blue, you play counter spell too, unless you're some kind of psychopath. I have a hard time deciding when to run impulses a lot of the times. He puts 2 impulses in here. When
Yeah,
it
that's a
comes
tough
to
one for me. I recognize its value, but I'm not sure when I should put it in a deck or not.
same, I see this impulse and I'm like, okay, do I want to run 2 impulse, or do I want to put in another Swords to Plowshares and another Disenchant, or potentially another 2 Swords to Plowshares? I don't know. Hard to decide. Turbo Xerox decks, Turbo Xerox style decks, Miracle Grow style decks. I've now begun to appreciate more the power of cards like this, these library sorting cards, stuff like that. But still, I don't know that I'd play it in this deck. I feel like I just want to put in some swords, more swords. But they are definitely a good choice in like a 4-color deck, a deck where you might need some mana fixing. That's another benefit that a card like Impulse will have over just adding like another swords or another disenchant. It lets you dig a little bit further down into your library, maybe early on, help you find that land that you need to play things on curve on turns 2 and turns 3, stuff like that. So I like that. One thing I want to say about Force of Will related to Hibernation Sliver. When I first saw Hibernation Sliver, I was like, oh, okay. Pay 2 life, return creature to your hand. That can help you if somebody plays Wrath of God. Maybe you say, okay, I'll give up 4 life to return 2 of my slivers back to my hand. So after the Wrath, I'm not back to 0. You know, I'm not back at starting point. I can build my board, my sliver board state up faster. I don't have to draw more slivers and wait, potentially get destroyed by that Wrath. I can come back stronger, faster. In a format where you also have Force of Will, you can have Force of Will in your hand, no other blue cards. They play something you really don't want on the board or a spell you really don't want to resolve. You can just pay 2 to return Hibernation Sliver to your hand, pitch it to Force of Will. It basically becomes a pay 2 life counter spell. So very good. I love those 2 in combination. What are the lands?
What's
the lands include hold on a second, I'll get to that real quick.
Okay.
Lands include duels because they're awesome and they're legal and extended. This is an extended deck. City of Brass because it's a 4-color deck. Wasteland because you need 1 wasteland or a strip mine, right? Right?
Right.
You gotta put that in. You gotta put that shit in. 3 floodplains, cards that you don't really see played any longer, but at this point, fetch lands didn't exist yet, so they have these slow fetches from Mirage.
But they work with duels, so
exactly.
It's cool.
Comes into play tapped, but when you have a format where you have duels available, even the Mirage fetch lands, which are slower, are definitely worth it if you're playing a 3 or 4-color deck. And now I'm reminding myself, of course, that this is a 4-color deck. That brings me back to the impulse and what I said earlier about mana fixing. That's probably why he decides to run the impulse. Probably 2 impulses are a big help in smoothing out mana curves. And then Volrash Stronghold. Legendary land, tap to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. Pay 1 colorless and 1 black, tap. Put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. A land I don't often think of playing. Could be many reasons to play this, but it's especially good in decks with synergistic creatures and in decks with the next card. This enchantment, Wonder. This is the enchantment from Urza's Saga. It says damage that would reduce your life total to less than 1. Instead reduces it to 1 if you control a creature. So if you have Worship out and you have Volrash Stronghold down, you can keep bringing creatures from your graveyard back to the top of your library. Keep drawing creatures.
Did you say Wonder the first time? Worship.
Did I say Wonder?
Maybe. I don't know.
I don't know either. But anyways, if they start picking off your creatures, you can bring them back to your library, play them out again. Now, if they Wrath of God you or something and then hit you with a lightning bolt, Bull Rash Stronghold isn't going to help you there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But if you have 3 creatures out and they start picking them off one by one, you can rebuild them. I guess the other thing you could do with Bull Rash Stronghold is after pitching your hibernation sliver to force a will, you could bring it back.
Don't you have to remove it from the game?
Son of a bitch. Yeah, you do. So never mind. So Volrash Stronghold, I don't know. Maybe it's just there to help with wonder. Maybe it's also just there because, hell, you're playing sliver decks which are synergistic. You know,
Yeah,
they
you're
get
playing
rid
a
of your.
lot of smaller creatures. You might be using them up, getting them killed. You want to bring them back. You have 2 kinds that can sacrifice themselves for things.
Yes.
So you could be sacrificing the one that gains you life and then putting it back on top of your library.
Also, you could Wall of Blossoms.
Oh,
Yeah.
Steve,
Draw a card.
maybe we've cracked the code.
Yeah. Probably pretty
Volrath
good with Wall of
Stronghold
Blossoms
with
too.
Blossoms is great.
Which is probably a combo that's been played in like 100,000 different versions of the rock. We're just not remembering. But
Yeah.
this is
Good. I
the
like that.
deck. I like it. Low casting costs, synergistic slivers with Wall of Blossoms that synergizes with Volrash Stronghold. You've got the best blue counters in the format. You've got the best white removal in the format. You've got wonder. My overall impression, the kind of deck I generally like. It's a mix of
wonder again.
Son of a bitch. Worship. I even wrote wonder down. I wrote wonder down in the show notes. That's why I keep saying wonder.
Yeah. That's a blue spell.
Worship. This is the kind of deck that I like. It's a mix. It's a good mix of aggro and control.
Yeah, I like that.
It's versatile. It can go toe to toe against a bunch of different strategies.
You can sack your creatures. You can bring them back. You can counter things. You can remove things. You can do a creature swarm.
It can be the beatdown or control, depending on what your opponent's doing.
I just, for some reason, before you scroll down to the lands, when I'm just looking at the cards, I'm like, can I cast? Can I mana fix with this deck? Can I get my colors that I need? And this is a dual land era deck, so
definitely with duels. Yeah,
I'm wondering how this deck would, adapt if I had to switch the mana base up.
It becomes harder in pre-modern. So the deck I have built for slivers right now is a 5-color deck, just because I wanted to play Sliver Queen, which is not necessarily the best card to play.
And I did the same thing. I think I made mine. Yeah. It's mostly green, but there's like 5 colors in here.
Okay. And you can make do. I mean, in pre-modern, you don't have the dual lands, but you do have some fetch lands. So I ran the fetch lands that are legal in pre-modern, and then one of each basic land for me to fetch with the fetch lands. You do have City of Brass, but you don't want to take too much damage from City of Brass. But in addition to that, you have Gemstone Mine, and you have Undiscovered Paradise. And Undiscovered Paradise keeps coming back to your hand, so you have to keep redropping that land, so you can't build up a high land count. And Gemstone Mine, you can only tap 3 times before it goes to your graveyard. But if you keep your curve low, those downsides aren't necessarily a deal breaker, because you don't need to build up a board with 5-6 lands if all you ever need to do is cast 2 casting cost spells. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So there are ways to do it in pre-modern, although it's not always the best. On to the next Slivers deck for your consideration, Alex. This one is called DD Slivers. Not DD Mega Doo-Doo. DD Slivers. You look at me funny. Do you know what DD Mega Doo-Doo is?
I do not.
Oh my god, you don't know DD Mega, dude.
I was about to ask.
Every time I see, every time I would look at this deck named DD, I see DD and I just think of Mega Dude. Somebody said the name DD recently in my life, and I was like, Mega Dude right afterwards. You should look that up on YouTube. I'm not going to watch it now, but it's a classic. It's a classic clip. It's actually quite sad, but also hilarious. It was from a local news broadcast where the local newscaster was discussing the recent death of a local police officer in the line of duty. And she was reading the person's name. She was like fallen officer DD, and she didn't know how to pronounce the last name. And for some reason it came out as Mega Doo Doo.
See, now you're making me laugh at this.
Okay. Hold on. We'll play this. Let's go to YouTube.
Oh God, no.
It's a short clip.
The sliver deck that I made, Steve. Part of the reason I don't have that one card in there is because I have no blue in here. It's a 4-color non-blue sliver deck.
I mean, that's a bold choice, Alex.
Yeah.
Not many men.
You'll see how bold it is.
Not many men have made a slivers deck that does not include a crystalline sliver. Let's watch Giraffe Woman's Final Days.
God. What is going on?
I don't know. That's a sponsored video somehow. Okay, what's going on is we're going to watch a DD Mega Dude. Are you ready?
No.
So that's the woman's name, Deirdre Mangadote. I don't know. Mangadote. Rest in peace, fallen officer. I can't believe you haven't seen this. This is probably like, I don't know how old this is. Maybe 10 years old.
To this fallen Louisville.
Wait, hold on. Doesn't always work the best when I...
Why are you doing this to me?
Okay, just watch. Listen.
Final goodbyes to this fallen Louisville police officer.
Lagging.
DD Mega Doo Doo. I'm sorry, Mangudu.
Okay. I don't know why I had to add that laugh at the end. This is the DD Mega Doo Doo clip, Alex.
All right. Well, now I know that.
Back to DD Slivers. DD Slivers, piloted by Christian Lures. I don't know how to pronounce that. Lures. I'm going to go with Lures. To a fourth place finish at Pro Tour Chicago, 1999. This was also an extended tournament. Other decks in the top 8. Oath of Druids decks. Multiple Oath of Druids decks. We have to talk about Oath of Druids decks at some point. I have never built or played an Oath of Druids deck. You've never built or played an Oath of Druids deck. They are dominating pre-modern.
Yeah, I know. We've talked about it a little bit now, especially right like after land tax exiting.
And even in the land tax deck, land tax scroll rack, Mox Diamond deck, I mean, Oath of Druids is often in there.
Uh-huh.
Often. Necro, 5-color green. Blue LD, which is maybe blue land destruction. Oh, maybe not though. Let me click on it real quick. Would that make sense? Blue land destruction.
It does.
There's Dust Bowl.
Yep. Wasteland.
There's Wasteland. And then counter spells and shit. Cocoa Pebbles, don't know what that is. Suicide Brown.
I want to find out what Cocoa Pebbles is.
Okay, let's click on it. We're not talking about it. This is an episode about Cocoa Pebbles, but we're going to have a look. It wasn't an episode about D Mega Doo Doo either, but we watched that clip.
Oh, we got
Cocoa
0
Pebbles.
casting cost creatures.
Is Cocoa Pebbles just a white, blue, black deck? It was named after a cereal just because that's what people were doing back in this time, naming their decks after cereals.
I don't know.
Academy Rector. Phyrexian Walker. Shield Sphere. You love these two cards.
Yeah, well,
The Writ, Demonic Consultation,
free
Duress. Or of Silence and Goblin Bombardment. I like that. We'll go through this at some point. It's a Necro deck also for Necropotence. But DD Slivers. DD stands for Demonic Direction. Summary of the deck. It is a 5-color deck. It's also about 1 part creatures, 1 part removal / counters, 1 part lands. There's 20 creatures in DD Slivers, all 2 casting costs, all slivers, no Wall of Blossoms to be found. All of the cards in this deck that he expects to hardcast are 2 casting costs or less. The only cards that are above 2 casting costs are Force of Will, which he's not playing. You don't plan on hardcasting most of the time. And Misdirection, which you also don't plan on hardcasting most of the time. It's an instant. You may remove a blue card in your hand from the game instead of paying the casting cost. Target spell with a single target targets another target instead. So you got your slivers. What were we going to say?
I was going to say this deck looks fast. I don't know what makes it look faster to me than the last deck. Maybe I'm just what
I was just going to say. I feel like it's just exactly the same.
Okay.
Speed wise, at least.
Okay.
All 2 casting costs, right?
Yeah, I guess for some reason I'm just looking at the creatures up there, and I feel. Never mind. I don't know.
You just get a different
Just seems
vibe
more
from
manageable. It seems like just the overall look of the deck. It just seems like I'll more consistently get things out quickly, but I'm just it's just an instinct, just a gut feeling I'm having from looking at it.
Okay. At first glance, Alex thinks this deck might be a little bit faster than the counter slivers deck we looked at. He includes the best counter spells and the best targeted removal spells from white. Again, 2 swords, 2 disenchants. You got counter spell. You got Force of Will. You got Misdirection. His special sauce in this deck is composed of 2 cards. Simple recipe. Special sauce component 1 is Misdirection. I love this card and I want to start using it. I've never played with it. I got to start building with it. Special sauce component number 2 is Demonic Consultation. So, oopsie. Demonic Consultation. This is what really sets this deck apart from other Slivers decks. The DD, did I mention already? Is, what does it stand for?
Demonic Direction?
Demonic Direction, yeah. So the DD is Demonic Consultation and Misdirection. Demonic Consultation is this card from Ice Age. Everybody knows it. But I'm going to read it because it has a lot of text in it. And I know the card, but even though I knew the card, I didn't quite remember what it did. 1 black instant. You name a card. Let's say you name Acidic Sliver. You remove the top 6 cards of your library from the game, and then you reveal the next card to all players like this. If the card you revealed is the card named, put it into your hand. If not, you remove it from the game and you continue revealing the top card of your library and removing it from the game until the named card appears. So this card scares me. So I've never played it. And we've mentioned it at some point in the podcast too. And I think at that point, I also said, it scares me. I'm afraid of losing too many important cards. I imagine like I name the card and then it's in the top 6 cards. So it just ends up in my graveyard. And then I have to keep removing cards from my deck into my graveyard until I find the next copy of it. It scares me. The idea of losing that many cards scares me. But I guess you use it to help you assemble a board state that finishes the game fairly quickly. Which brings me to my main question. If you're running demonic consultation in the slivers deck, what do you demonic consultation for? Do you waste it on a sliver? I say waste. Is it a waste to use it on a sliver? Maybe you hold a demonic consultation until you have like 4 slivers out and they're pumped with muscle sliver, and you demonic consultation for wing sliver. And then that gives all of your slivers the ability to fly over any blockers, and you swing that turn for lethal.
Okay.
So like a demonic consultation for a wing sliver, you might lose a lot of cards, but it could also be a game ender. I was thinking maybe you demonic consultation for a crystalline sliver, the sliver that Alex doesn't run in his slivers deck, but it helps protect all of your other slivers. That's a big deal. I think maybe the real targets are a misdirection or a force of will that can really swing the momentum of the game. So
Sure.
demonic consultation is an instant. Force of will is an interrupt, which doesn't exist anymore, now an instant. Misdirection is an instant. I can imagine cases where they do something that you either really don't want to happen, or maybe they target something of yours that you would like to shoot back at them instead. You cast demonic consultation as an instant for either a force of will or misdirection. You bounce your hibernation sliver back to your hand, and then you force a will or misdirect something. I don't know. Maybe you just get a couple of demonic consultations out, and you demonic consult for a crystalline sliver, and then a muscle sliver, and then a wing sliver, and you kind of assemble your sliver Voltron. Those are just some thoughts I had.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I think like you said, maybe more for one of the spells for a force of will or a counter spell, or even a Swords to Plowshares if you really need to get rid of something. You know, they
That's
managed
true.
to get something down that you don't get a chance to counter, and it's cramping your style.
Mm-hmm.
That could swing the game.
I found this old article on Star City Games website from January 3rd, 2014, written by Mike Flores. Good artist copy, great artist steal, where he talked about, I should go back up to the top, some old decks that were inspiring, worth digging up, were big influences on him. He writes about 20 different decks from different eras of the game that he found to be very influential. And DD Slivers was in here.
Oh, okay.
What do you say about DD Slivers? Christian Lohr scored a top 8 at Mauer Chicago. Bob Mauer won this tournament. But the strategy had been innovated by Cabal Rogue members Brian Koval and John Schuler the year before. The strategy exemplifies something I learned from Koval, or at least adopted, which may or may not have been a net positive. Koval was super proud of being able to make unfair broken decks interact. He wanted to beat them with decidedly unbroken decks. I like this. This is kind of what I do when I play Magic. I don't gravitate towards the broken deck. I don't gravitate towards the top 2 or 3 decks in the meta.
Yeah, I agree. I want to play something that will respond to that meta that's like different. Yeah.
I want to take a deck that's not broken, and I want to try to make it compete at least with the broken decks. He wanted to beat them with decidedly unbroken decks. His major innovation was to add demonic consultation to assemble Sliver Voltron and other awesome stuff. So I read this and I get the impression that when they played it, they used demonic consultation just to get like whatever sliver would be best to add to the board state at the time.
And then contradicts that in the next part.
And other awesome stuff. So maybe the next part is the other awesome stuff.
Yeah.
Can you imagine a combo opponent thinking the path was clear, going for it, only to see this deck consult for force of will, Return hibernation sliver to hand to pitch for it. Yeah, pretty cool. I think that's the real power of demonic consultation. And that's probably what I would do with it. And I would hold it in my hand until I ended up in a situation where maybe I really needed it to cast either a force of will or a misdirection that could really end the game or change the momentum of the game or have a big effect on the game.
It's additional forces of will, right? Like a demonic consultation is your 5th force of will as long as you haven't used all 4 of them already.
Yeah. And in my opinion, if you're going to use a demonic consultation and potentially lose that many cards from your deck, you better be doing something big.
You're doing it to save yourself or to finish. Yeah.
And a force of will or a misdirection against a proper target is something big. So, yeah.
I like the point 2, which I had like already forgotten, even though we just talked about it a couple minutes ago, that you can return the sliver to your hand, pitch to the force of will, which is awesome.
It is quite awesome. Lands include, I'm tired, man. I'm having a hell of a time adapting to US time. I'm still on Australian time. Well, it's 9 p.m. right now. We're recording this late. I've fucking been up since 1:30 in the morning. I keep waking up sometime between 1 and 3 in the morning every day this week. And then I don't go back to bed. I just stay up. I go to work. I come home. I'm fucking exhausted. Fucking exhausted. Lands include a bunch of duels. Again, this is an extended deck. City of Brass, Undiscovered Paradise, Gemstone Mine, all the things we talked about that you would run in a 5-color deck. And then also Floodplains.
Okay.
Again, worth running to get that duel if you're playing 3-4 color decks in formats where the duels are legal. That's DD Slivers. There was a card in this deck in the sideboard that I don't remember seeing before. It's just right here. Honor the Fallen. Let's pull this up. Rare from Acadian Mass. 1 colorless, 1 white. Instant. Remove all creature cards and all graveyards from the game. You gain 1 life for each card removed this way. Kind of a weird card to sideboard. I don't know what was going on in the meta that made him take up a sideboard spot for this.
Because you have like sliver options that can do stuff like that for you to gain life by, you know what I mean?
Vital Slivers.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm saying I don't know what would be in the meta. I mean, it seems like an obvious way to combat reanimation. Yeah. Reanimating some big fucking behemoth on turn 2. You can cast this as an instant for 2 mana and potentially put an end to that.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Gotta be that. Gotta be.
Yeah.
But I don't see any reanimation here in the.
Yeah, I think it's more about removing the cards than it is about the gaining the life.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Anyways, DD Slivers, that's cool. I appreciate this strategy. This black magic strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Losing a bunch of resources, but to do something big. That's what black often does. It does scary shit. It does shit that I'm not comfortable with. I'm a white mage and a green mage, sometimes a blue mage, not usually a black mage. From Ice Age, we lived through Ice Age. We opened up Ice Age packs. I don't think I ever played Necropotence or Demonic Consultation because they're just scary to me.
Yeah.
Even though they're dominant cards.
I played black a lot and I never played those back then. This card, this was a card that I just slept on, I just didn't realize, how you could use this. Like the downside just seems so bad. And there's so many bad cards in Ice Age that when you come across something like, it's easy to be like, oh, it's just another bad card.
If you're opening Ice Age packs as a 13-year-old and you open up and pull another card that has this many words on it, you just set it aside.
I always liked cards with a lot of words. I never had a problem with them. I'd always be like, it was kind of exciting to me, like, okay, this does something, unique and complicated. Let me dig into it and see how it works. That would be cool to me. But yeah, just the such a big downside for like the benefit of it wasn't obvious enough to me. I didn't realize how you could dig for something you needed at a certain time.
Yeah. I think the too many words is a pretty good heuristic, though. You think about how many Ice Age cards had too many words and also sucked. Especially if you want to just like save time, a good time saving heuristic is you see a card with a ton of words on it in Ice Age, you just set it aside.
Yeah. Everything around then, you could say the same thing for,
that is true.
Dark.
But those people who do the extra work, who see those extra words and they're like, I'm not going to set this aside, I'm going to read them. That's their edge.
And that's how you make a sweet ass tackle maggot deck.
And that's how you top 8 at Pro Tour Chicago 1999. Now into the third Slivers deck, Alex. DD Slivers is cool. The third Slivers deck is called Slivers exclamation point. Ah, Slivers exclamation point. Rob Daughtry. I think it's pronounced Daughtry. Not Daughtry from American Idol. This is Rob Daughtry, pilot of Slivers exclamation point. Not who's the singer of Matchbox 20? Rob something. I'm forgetting. Never mind. Slivers exclamation point, piloted by Rob Daughtry to a 6th place finish at Worlds 1999. Again, another extended tournament. What was he facing in this tournament? I don't know what's going on here. 16 points, 15 points, top 8, blah, blah, blah. But he was facing Mono Blue Control, Oath of Druids, Oath of Druids, Oath of Druids, Pox. That's interesting. We should get into Pox at some point. Another Ice Age card with a whole lot of words. Indefinite downsides that people who were a little more clever than us back in the day did turn into tournament winning decks. Pox. Stompy. I love Stompy. Stomp. In white red aggro. I almost said aggro. But he came in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th place. I already said that. Summary of Slivers exclamation point. It's a 5-color deck. It's also about 1 part creatures, 1 part direct damage counters, 1 part lands, 20 creatures. You'll see when this loads, they're all 2 casting costs. They are all Slivers. Trust me. See, I didn't lie to you. 20 creatures, all 2 casting costs, all Slivers.
Same exact words as last deck, right?
Exactly. I believe. Yes. At least one of the decks. I think the last
I don't know
one
about you, Steve, but this deck seems a little bit faster than the last one.
Actually, I agree with this one is faster, in my opinion. Because you have a shock and lightning bolts.
Damage,
yeah. All cards he expects to cast are 2 casting costs or less. He includes the best counter spells and the best direct damage from red. So his special sauce here is the ability to go to the face with burn. It's essentially the same Sliver deck skeleton that we've seen previously in the last 2 decks, but instead of having Swords to Plowshares and Disenchant, the best white removal, he throws in the best red direct damage instead. 4 lightning bolts, 1 shock. I am surprised by a deck with no artifact and no enchantment removal performing this well at Worlds.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about that.
Really surprised.
Changing the white to the red here, and you lose that like disenchant. I guess maybe he's just relying on the countering for that. You use the counters, especially heavy on enchantments, artifacts that you can't otherwise deal with. And then what the red does as the a trade-off, it gives you the ability to like finish. Because the Swords of Plowshares and Disenchants couldn't help you wrap up the game, obviously.
So this one is definitely it's the most aggressive of the ones we've seen. I think it has the ability to go control too, because you do have, 12 counter spells. But yeah, because you exchange the white removal with red direct damage, I think it's more aggro than aggro control.
Yeah, it's like that red blue thing. I mean, what do other red blue decks do? Do they probably don't bother to deal with artifacts or enchantments much either, right? Like rely on the counters.
I guess not. And to be honest, I've
Maybe
never in
like,
my life played a counterburn deck.
Mox Monkey kind of stuff maybe in there, or some red artifact destruction, but I'd imagine they're using the counters for that.
I'd be afraid. And I'm still
I know.
surprised
I know.
that a deck that placed at Worlds doesn't have the ability to remove artifacts or enchantments.
Yeah.
Because sometimes even with the counter abilities, you don't have the counter in your hand when they play something devastating.
They sneak one through. It makes me nervous to not be able to get rid of permanent, like a permanent at all. Only rely on counters. That's not really my style. I've played counter decks with counters in them a lot, but I don't think I ever go like, full counter for my solutions to things,
Yeah.
So this deck makes me think, and how should I say this? I thought about this in the context of slivers already, but specifically now, since we were just talking about not having certain types of removal, powder keg, I feel like might be an interesting pick for something like this. Since all your creatures are 2 casting cost, you can easily avoid destroying your own creatures with the powder keg.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also use it to destroy artifacts.
Yeah. And those are your only permanent, not just creatures. Those are literally your only permanents. Those 2 casting cost creatures are your only permanents. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, okay.
Because powder keg, it clears all permanents, right?
To worry about, yeah.
Does powder keg clears? It's more than just creatures, right?
It destroys creatures and artifacts.
And artifacts,
with
okay.
the mana cost that is the number of counters on it.
Yeah. So I mean, this deck, powder keg wasn't printed yet, but yeah, if you wanted to update this, modify it for pre-modern, not a bad thing to include. Not a bad thing to include. Lands, bunch of duels, City of Brass, Undiscovered Paradise, Gemstone Mine, because it's a 5-color deck again. 1 floodplain and 3 bad rivers. Bad rivers is just another, bad river is just another one of those mirage slow fetches. He runs 3 of these and just 1 floodplain, because in this particular deck, these colors, blue, black, are his dominant colors. So he calls this slivers exclamation point. I'm going to call it counter slivers exclamation point. It's a counter sliver. Or sorry, counter burn slivers. Counterburn. It's a counterburn. Counterburn slivers. And the last one for today, last one we're going to talk about, we have a pre-modern legal slivers deck, which is also the format of the deck that I'm working on. It is pre-modern Gro-A slivers. Once this loads, it was designed and piloted by @F Powell's MTG on YouTube. That's at FPAWLUSZ for his YouTube channel. You can add an MTG to that. Let's see when this loads. It's going to load eventually. Here we go. Who doesn't love slivers? Brewing and Premodern. FPAWLUSZ MTG on YouTube. Excellent gameplay. Excellent deck text. Excellent deck design on this channel. What did he do? What did he do with pre-modern Gro-A slivers? Well, he combined slivers with the pre-modern Gro-A-Tog shell. So I was trying to think, when I build slivers in pre-modern, what do I want my strategy to be? What kind of cards do I want to play with the slivers from the pre-modern card pool? And we've gone over the Gro-A-Tog, the Gro format, the Gro style decks. We've discussed multiple Gro style decks. After we discussed Xerox, we moved on to the Gro decks, the Miracle Gro decks. We haven't focused on a Gro-A-Tog deck, but the Gro-A-Tog decks are very similar to the Gro decks. They grew out of the Gro decks. He took this Gro shell, and instead of like merfolk, which we saw in some of the Gro shells, instead of threshold creatures, which we saw in some of the Gro shells, he ran a bunch of 1 or 2 casting cost slivers with great synergies. I love it. There's a great shell for slivers in pre-modern. Summary, he went 3 color. So now we're in a format where you don't have the benefit of running dual lands. So it's a little bit smarter for consistency's sake, if you really want to make the most competitive deck, to cut your color scheme down from 5 to preferably 3. I have the best luck when I build pre-modern decks with 1, 2, 3 color decks.
Mm-hmm.
You can run 4 and 5 color decks, because sometimes you just have some fun cards you want to play, but it does get more difficult to play things consistently and to not kill yourself with City of Brass. Shit like that. So this is a 3 color deck. It's about 1 part creatures, 1 part counters, card draw, 1 part lands, 17 creatures, all 1 to 2 casting costs. Here you got your 1 casting cost plated sliver. And they're all slivers. This is the appearance of plated sliver. We haven't seen plated sliver in these decks yet. The decks we talked about so far, Legions wasn't printed yet. So plated sliver is another sliver that gives your slivers pluses. Muscle sliver gives everything +1/+1. Plated sliver gives +0/+1. But it's pretty good for what it is. It's 1 casting cost, 1/1. So it comes out as a 1/2 for just 1 mana, and it makes all of your slivers tougher.
Nice and cheap and helpful, yeah.
The first appearance of another sliver, also printed in Legions, which wasn't printed when the other decks we've talked about were designed. Quick Sliver. This is a sliver that we talked about in episode 59 when we went through the sliver card pool. I didn't like it very much. You were more high on it than I was at the time. This is 1 colorless, 1 green, 1/1. You may play Quick Sliver anytime you could play an instant. Any player may play sliver cards anytime he or she could play an instant. So you can cast all your slivers as instants when this is out. I'm kind of surprised that this is a sliver that you choose. It's not the sliver I would choose. I'm trying to figure out why he chose it. I think it might be, let me say what, you can tell me what you think. It might be that, he's running 3 colors. If you want to keep your deck at 3 colors, not add another color. The other decks we've seen ran Hibernation Sliver, ran Acidic Sliver. For those, you have to add black or red. If you want to keep it at 3 colors, this is actually, I think, probably the best other sliver to run in white, blue, green that you're not already running. This or Metallic Sliver. And Metallic Sliver is just 1 colorless, and it's a vanilla 1/1. This one at least has some kind of additional ability, or provides some additional, or has some additional effect. And maybe you don't ever want to use it, but maybe it comes in handy sometimes. So my only thought is maybe he's just running it because it's the next best sliver to run in this color scheme that he didn't already choose. What do you think, Alex?
So what I was going to say first was, since he's playing counters, if you want to leave your mana open for counter spells, okay, then you can use the Quick Sliver's ability
That's true.
to cast your creatures on your opponent's turn.
You fucking nailed it, I think. I'm pretty sure you nailed it. That makes perfect sense. Leave some mana open. And then if nothing happens on your opponent's turn, right before the beginning of your turn, then you play your sliver.
Yeah.
Okay. I will say, so he has this video. He built his Premodern Sliver deck. This isn't really loading. He built this Gro-A sliver. He played this an hour and a half long video. He played it against multiple other decks. I watched most of this video. I didn't do my due diligence. I got a lot of shit to do, people. I just came from the other side of the plane. I had to get back to work. Got a lot of things to do.
You've been fighting the Earth's rotation.
Oh, it's been difficult. It's been a difficult week. I watched almost the entire hour and a half video. He starts with a deck tech. He ends with a recap. In the recap, somewhere he mentions that Quick Sliver was like a real superstar in one of the matchups, maybe more than one of the matchups. It really performed really well for him. I think in the deck tech, he actually, when he's going through his creature, and when he's going through his cards, he's like, I'll see how Quick Sliver will perform. It was kind of a wild card. He wasn't so sure about it. And in the summary, he seemed to be really happy with how it performed. I watched almost every minute of this video, and I couldn't find the parts where he was actually casting Quick Sliver. Like, he was missing it somehow. So I'll say, like, I wasn't sure about it. He wasn't sure about it either when he built the deck, but at some point it performed really well for him. Maybe because of the reason you said. So that was a good.
It's a good idea. Like, I wouldn't have thought of it on my own, I don't think, because my natural thought is to combine Quick Sliver with Hunter Sliver. No, dang. See, I'm wrong. I think I did this the first time we talked about this. I keep thinking Hunter Sliver gives slivers haste.
It does not.
Provoke.
Yeah.
Just not haste.
But anyways, Quick Sliver. F. Paul says it was performed really well. You could also use it like Alex described. Leave mana open to do things on your opponent's turn.
Mm-hmm. Or if you have a different way to give your stuff haste, some kind of hasty card.
Yeah.
Be good.
Hasty card would be good. Those are the creatures. Gush makes an appearance. Fucking great.
Very good.
If you can put Gush into a pre-modern deck, do it. I will say the gameplay that I watched, I mean, Gush was a superstar. There were times where he was in trouble. It looked like he was in trouble. And then he gushes and he pulls the things that he needs. And that's just the kind of thing that happens when you're playing blue and you're playing card draw. It happens a lot. It's happened with me when I'm playing Gush. I think I'm in trouble. I gush. Then it's a different game all of a sudden. Then I'm back in business. Then I got my opponent on the back foot. Know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying.
Foil makes an appearance. Foil is added since Force of Will is not an option in Premodern. Force of Will is banned in Premodern. But foil is not. It's not as good as Force of Will. But the ability to counter a spell without paying the mana to counter that spell is so powerful that even a weakened Force of Will is still incredible. And you're going to want to include it if you're playing a certain amount of blue. So foil is 2 colors, 2 blue, instant. You may discard an island and another card from your hand instead of paying for mana cost, counter target spell.
This one worries me. I know I've seen it in deck lists before, like good decks, and so I know it's good and people play it, but it's kind of like we were just talking about with, Demonic Consultation and other cards, like that downside, that losing 2 cards, it just seems so severe to me. But I guess if you're again like in the situation where it's the game's on the line,
Mm-hmm. The game's online. You got to do what you got to do, Alex.
yeah,
And one of the cards is an island. Islands, if you have a gush, you could always return them to your hand when you need.
hmm
Uh, the other card you discard, it could be any card. It doesn't have to be a blue card, right? Yep, discard an island and another card from your hand.
that's true.
So, you could pitch a quick sliver.
Okay, and it doesn't remove it from the game like Force of Will does. So now
Yeah.
it's in your graveyard, and you can bring it back, with your
Which you're not going to do in this
stronghold in the other deck or whatever.
in the other deck. Yeah.
Yeah.
You might feel fine pitching your wing sliver. If you already have one wing sliver out, you don't need another one out. They're redundant.
Okay. You're convincing me.
You might feel fine pitching a portent. I mean, a portent you would want in your hand, especially early in the game, to smooth out your mana, to help you have the best possible hands in early turns, but later in the game, portent's not as good, I think.
Or with foil, you could just drop 2 lands if you have lots of lands late game that you don't need in your hand.
You could. It does say I just read this, I'll read it again. And another card. It can be an island, it could be 2 islands.
Yeah.
You could
So
fucking gush
Mhm.
2 islands. Fuck yeah, Alex.
We figure stuff out on the fly a lot.
Sideboard. Armageddon. Winter Orb. I've been building these low casting cost decks. I'm often putting Winter Orb in the main board.
I've seen you doing that.
It becomes very good. I mean, there's a lot of decks. If they're not prepared.
If you're prepared for it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Armageddon. I should be playing with Armageddon more often, or at least sideboarding Armageddon. I mean, Winter Orb,
especially
Armageddon.
with Gush and Armageddon together are so awesome.
And devastating when you're running a deck that has tops out at two casting cost. I mean, most of your opponents are not going to be running decks that top out at 2 casting cost cards. Meddling Mage, why not? Depending on what deck you're playing against, Meddling Mage can just be a game ender if you get a Meddling Mage out early.
Yeah, just pop them in against combo decks and certain kind of decks that have a linchpin.
Yeah, what is this? Ray Revelation. Destroy target enchantment with flashback.
Okay. I remember seeing that. Yeah, we talked about that before. I think I like
Always
that.
Good. Depending on the meta. I mean, in any meta, there's usually multiple decks that run powerful enchantments and depend on those enchantments to do their thing. It's good to have a lot of enchantment removal.
Also, since that has flashback, now you can pitch it with the foil and then cast it from your graveyard. So that's good.
That's true. Curse Totem.
I love little synergies like that. That makes me happy.
Anyways.
You have to think about playing with flashback cards, for that effect. Like I can use them to pitch for something else, like a foil.
Yeah. Which I never think about that. I don't know why. I think about flashback as something I could play twice.
Right, yeah.
But I have never tried to take advantage of flashback cards with.
It's kind of like using them like madness, sort of, instead of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Similar effect to madness.
Okay, so that's pre-modern Gro-A Slivers. Really cool. Way better than the pre-modern sliver deck I have built so far. But there's a time and a place for different types of sliver decks. Not everything has to be the most competitive all the time. Sometimes you can fuck around and play Sliver Queen. That's what I'm doing.
I wanted to use the other one. What's the other one? Sliver
Overlord?
Or
There's one from Scourge. Sliver Overlord from Scourge.
It's called something.
I believe it's Sliver Overlord from
Sliver
Scourge.
Overlord, yeah.
I can't remember what Sliver Overlord does though.
It allows you to tutor for slivers and gain control of slivers.
Okay.
I have like some sort of, stupid fantasy about turning other things into slivers and then stealing.
Oh yeah, as you do.
As I do.
You love changing cards to other card types, changing colors to other colors.
Yeah.
That's your thing?
That sort of effect existed a long time ago, but pretty minimally and like not very strongly. So now that I see a few more options to do that, I'm like excited, that's all.
You're all about that life.
I like the things that the avenues that have been expanded compared to when we used to play, and I'm like, oh, now this is like maybe not viable, but closer to viable.
And you like doing things that other people don't do.
I do, yeah.
So that when we sit down to play and you do some thing that I'm not prepared for, I'm like, what the who
it's like you were just talking
that?
about like if I can win 30%
that?
of the time doing something stupid, I'm happy.
Who does that? The answer is Alex does that. Anyways, that's the end of the episode, Alex. That's all I want to talk about today.
Okay.
I just want to talk about some sliver decks that I saw. That's the whole fucking episode. Steve saw some sliver decks, and now he's like, I'm going to talk about these sliver decks that I saw. But I think it was pretty informative.
Yeah, I learned a couple things. We figured a few things out in real time.
I like to see the different builds. It does make me want to play Demonic Consultation. Unfortunately, Demonic Consultation's not legal in Premodern, and that's the format that I'm building mostly.
I'm okay with that. It does. But I'm starting to get curious though about messing around with it.
Yeah, I do know that we're going to talk about this at least briefly on an upcoming episode. There are multiple formats that are similar to Premodern. There's Premodern, there's Middle School, there's another one that I can't remember the name of right now. Hyper Extended, I think that's what it is.
Okay.
They're all very similar card pools, old frame card pools that end at Scourge, but they have different. They have slightly different rules, different banned lists.
Different banned lists.
Hyper Extended, I think, doesn't have any banned lists. I think it just has restricted lists, which I like that idea, actually. I've looked at the banned list on Premodern and thought to myself, I wish some of these cards were simply restricted. So you still have the ability to play them sometimes.
That's one thing that's missing from Premodern a little bit. I feel nostalgic for having a restricted list. Some, because certain cards are in the in-between category. They shouldn't be banned, but you also, it should be like the one special card in your deck that, you have to try to get.
They're very powerful, but they're not necessarily format warping.
Mm-hmm.
If you only have one copy.
And especially because some cards become much more powerful if you have multiples of them in your deck.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
That's how I feel.
Don't remember what I was just saying, but that's the end of the episode. Do you have anything else you want to discuss today, Alex? Anything you want to add? Any words of wisdom potentially that you want to leave the viewers with?
Hang on to your cards. I know it may sound obvious, but don't sell them. Don't give them away unless you have to. Hang on to them. You might want them again one day.
That's the situation many of us run into. We have to. We have credit card bills and stuff.
Yeah.
But don't do it.
Don't do it just because you're bored of it or you're like meh. Hang on to it.
Yeah, if you're like, oh, I'm never going to play again. You don't know. You don't know people.
You might have kids or nephews or friends that you reconnect with, and you're like, oh, let's play again.
Hide the cards. Put them in a closet somewhere. Pretend like they're not even there. That's good advice. Those are words of wisdom. Or maybe Magic as a hobby is just all going into the toilet. Maybe we've reached the peak and it's only going down from here. And you're just telling all these people to hold all their cards. And they're just going to watch them go all the way to zero.
Not financial advice.
That's what a lot of people are thinking. That is true. Not financial advice. Magic the Gathering is not. I'm not an MTG finance person. I like looking at card prices. I like trying to find cards that I think are like at a reasonable price now, or at least a better price than they were in the future. But I don't buy Magic the Gathering cards as an investment. I invest in equities that produce cash flow. Cardboard does not produce cash flow. The old
Let me tell you
MTG
about my
market.
snow cone stand, Steve.
What'd you say?
Let me tell you about my snow cone stand.
Oh. It's at a reference to something. I feel like it is. Is it a reference to something?
Sort of. Not really. It's
Okay.
you want to. I'm trying to get you to invest in my snow cone
Oh,
stand.
okay. What was I saying? Cash flow, cardboard. The old cardboard market, if you have money to get into the old cardboard market, it's questionable whether or not now's a good time to get into it. But definitely historically, in the olden days, when old cardboard that is definitely very rare was available for significantly lower prices than you can get it for now. Like those card pools, the print runs were small enough that you could corner markets. People have done that. So when you say an advantage there, like if you have enough money, enough capital to like corner a market in an old card, Arabian Nights stuff, alpha stuff, go, that's probably pretty good investment. But other than that, I don't know. I would never look at Magic the Gathering as an investment. Just fucking buy
the investment is like bonus to me. You know what I mean? It's like
buy an index fund. Yeah.
Do this, play it, enjoy it, collect it, and then hopefully, if I'm lucky, stuff maintains value and has value.
Yeah, I like it as a player. Even if I had a bunch of money to buy the old stuff, I
like it as a greedy hoarder.
I would never buy more than a play set of stuff. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
I put all of my cards in hard plastic sleeves so that I can roll around in them and not mess them up.
Some people probably do that. Well, I mean, a lot of people put their cards in hard plastic sleeves. I don't know what they do with the cards in hard plastic sleeves. You can't shuffle them.
No.
You can't play with them. You can stroke them. That's probably what they do. Anyways, I'm signing off for the day, Alex.
Get some sleep.
I'll talk to everybody soon in episode 67 when we're going to talk about pre-modern clerics. I don't hear a lot of people talk about the cleric clan, but we're going to do just that. Talk to you later.